everyone. My name is Emily Moss, and I am a board member for WASB. And I am here today with composer Derek Jenkins. And he had two compositions in our recent fourth international composition contest. They were both in category 1 for grades 1 and 2, and their titles are Solar Flare and Fountains. So, Derek, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, great. We're going to go through a few questions and allow our audience to kind of get to know you a little bit more and these compositions. So let's start with your background. Tell us a bit about how you came to be a composer.
I surprisingly knew early on that it was something I wanted to do. Kind of started in 8th grade. I was playing, I think it was Pachelbel's Canon at the piano, and annoying my band director, and he's like, you need to do something with that. And so I decided to arrange it for a saxophone quintet. And while I enjoyed the process, I kept finding myself asking, like, well, what if I did this, or what if I did that? And I wanted to explore more, and so that kind of got me started. I think I composed my first piece like right after that, and I was immediately hooked. This idea of creating something and people playing it and performing it, and just getting to have fun. I felt like a kid in the sandbox almost. And so from 8th grade on, that's kind of where my focus was. Did undergraduate, started as a double major in composition and bassoon performance, but then discovered I just didn't have enough time. And so it switched to composition and theory. And that was at University of Missouri, Kansas City. Went to Rice for my master's in composition, and then actually ended up back at University of Missouri, Kansas City for my doctorate in composition and a master's in musicology. And now I'm in my 7th year teaching down at Arkansas State University in Jonesboro, and just recently got promotion in tenure. So that's been a nice plus.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let me guess, it was the bassoon reeds, making those bassoon reeds.
It was making the bassoon reeds. And then oddly enough, the year after I dropped the performance degree, Steve Davis came and became the new director of bands. And the very first concert, he put on the Mozart Serenade in C minor, and we were short on bassoons. So I ended up being the second bassoonist for that. And then later that same semester, he also programmed the Stravinsky Octet. So I actually did more playing that semester than I did as a bassoon performance major. So
well, I am a fellow bassoonist, so I can
wonderful.
relate to that diverging path for sure. Let's talk a little bit about the two compositions that were finalists for our composition contest, Solar Flare and Fountains. Tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind these pieces, and feel free to start with whichever one you wish.
Sure. Well, Fountains is a little bit older. The original piece was for string orchestra. When I went back to UMKC, one of my good friends was a TA for Steve Davis, and Steve Davis was running the Youth Symphony in Kansas City, and they were going to go play at Midwest, and they needed.
Remember that performance?
Yeah, great. they needed some grade 1 piece to balance out with like the Tchaikovsky 6th Symphony or something that they were doing. And so they reached out to me. My roommate's actually the one that kind of put the bug into Professor Davis's ear. And I was like, yeah, sure, I can write a grade 1 string piece. So it was a little daunting, but it was actually a lot of fun, a nice challenge. And the title was actually determined for me because they had to submit. So they basically asked me if I was on board. And the moment I said yes, they're like, okay. And so they submitted the program. But it actually worked out well, because it immediately got me thinking about Respighi's Fountains of Rome. And so I went and listened to that, and I actually stole a little bit of melodic material kind of, based around that piece. And I just had fun, just kind of playing around, like, exploring some aleatoric stuff, to make it sound like rain or water splashes. And then, allowing kind of the maximum of freedom with the solo. And, as I was kind of getting my feet wet as an academic, I in my first year, just busy, but wanted to keep doing composition related things. And so I arranged it for concert band because I felt like it would work really well for a grade one piece. You have a stellar flute player or a stellar trumpet player, and they can take the solo line, while the rest of the piece is really straightforward for a young band. So that was kind of just a fun experience.
Well,
Some things
fortunate for
determined
us.
for me. Yeah,
Fortunate for us in the wind band that you did that. Yeah.
yeah.
How about
Um,
the solar flare? Yeah.
so Solar Flare was oddly enough the band director I annoyed with Pachelbel's Canon is now the director of bands at the University of Tennessee at Martin, which is like 2 hours away from me.
Oh,
And they did a 40th anniversary honor band a few years back, and they decided for each band they were going to commission a piece. And he decided to have me work with the junior high band. And so the thought was, to write something, about a grade two. I think originally intended to be a concert opener, but then ended up working better as a closer. And so that was kind of the gist of the initial commission. But John Ulrich is his name. The two of us share a love for space and space exploration and stuff. And so, I kind of got thinking of just various things, like that it could be about. And for some reason, the idea of solar flare stuck with me, this, big eruption and just kind of, builds and builds and builds. And so that image stuck with me for the piece. And yeah, it was just that kind of generating material. But it was a lot of fun. It's been a while since I wrote anything that had kind of like a more or less steady groove to it. And so it was fun to explore that again, especially for a younger group, and kind of let my imagination run wild within the confines of a, grade two piece.
yeah. Excellent. That seems like such a great title for a young band piece in particular. Really explores the mind and lots of even extracurricular conversations you could have around it.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, what would you share with a conductor who was preparing either of these pieces to teach with their ensembles? Any words of advice or things they should consider when preparing either?
Um, I kind of take like an open view of my music, and I love to see what people bring to it. And so, I think the biggest thing would just be have fun with it. Enjoy the process. I like there's the opening and closing solo for Fountains, and I make a note that it doesn't have to be the same player, but I think every performance of it that I've been at, they've used the same player. And I think it'd be fun to explore, just those different timbres. You know, but yeah, I think, finding that way to kind of, express those ideas that I want, but kind of put your personal stamp on it is a fun spot that I like to exist as a composer. And when I collaborate with people.
Yeah.
Um,
That sounds great. And do you encourage that type of collaboration? If a conductor wanted to reach out to you to talk about, or maybe have their students speak with you as the composer, do you welcome that sort of interaction?
Oh, absolutely. It's part of the reason I gravitated towards, writing acoustic music, is because I get to work with people. And so I love those interactions. I love that dialogue. And some really interesting things have resulted, in the past, I've had people add narration over my music. I've had people add slideshows. I've seen all kinds of interesting things happen, and really effective collaborations and things that I would never have thought of. But in kind of brainstorming, programming, and stuff, the conductor comes up with these really interesting ideas, and I love running with it and see what happens.
That's great. Fantastic. Any interesting projects that you have that you're working on right now that you'd care to share about?
I actually just finished a wind ensemble piece, probably about a little over a month ago now. Like I said, I have a big love of space and space exploration, and this year marks 50 years since NASA's Skylab. And there's this whole drama with it being launched, and like, the heat shield ripped off and one of the solar panels ripped off and the other one like failed to deploy. And, they thought the thing was just going to kind of be dead in the water. And, so they spent about a week brainstorming, how are we going to fix this, in space. We've never had to do that. And so there's this whole really interesting drama with that almost kind of the music writes itself then. And so I wrote that piece. A good friend of mine is the director of bands up at Central Missouri. And I reached out to him. And so I'm headed up there next week for the premiere, and really excited. I had some fun. It's a grade 4 piece, but I explored, simple multiphonics in the saxophone, some pitch bending,
Fun.
some, interesting mallet choices in the percussion, just kind of create those kind of warping metal, dissonant things. And so I'm excited. It was fun doing things I normally don't do, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with it.
What's the title of this work?
It's called Gazing Earthward. It comes from one of the astronaut autobiographies I've read in the past. But they all talk about this idea, because ultimately the piece concludes with kind of this, majestic chorale type thing. Because the astronauts on Skylab could finally actually look at Earth and do, the experiments that they were supposed to be doing. But every astronaut that spends any kind of extensive time in orbit always talks about just how their favorite thing to do is just look down at the Earth, and their perception changes, and they become much more connected with humanity, and it's really fascinating stuff. And so that just kind of that scene, I think it was like a chapter title in one of these books, it just kind of resonated with me, and kind of the impetus for the whole piece, like that's where we're headed, is to eventually be able to look back at Earth.
Wow. Fantastic. Derek, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today about two compositions, and congratulations on that upcoming project, that premiere coming up. We'll look for that piece for sure. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to do that?
The easiest way would be through my website. There's a contact page. My website is www.derekmjenkins.com. And I have all my scores up there as perusal copies and recordings and all that stuff as well. But yeah, there's a contact page as well. So
perfect. Well, thanks again, Derek, and best of luck with the rest of your semester.
thank you.